The three deputies sharing is Deputy Ellis, Deputy Brune and Deputy Shankell to the Minister for Children and Youth Affairs the need to provide funding for Darndale Belcamp childcare services, and each of the deputies have 6 minutes between them. That's a total of 2 each.
Minister, I'd like to welcome you to your new job and wish you all the best. There is a crisis, Minister, developing in our public creches throughout the country, and in particular with the Jigsaw project, the Darndale Belcamp Integrated Childcare Services. Over the last number of years, there have been cuts to their budgets across a broad range of funders. In the case of Darndale, we have 260 childcare places in jeopardy, some of them from the most deprived and vulnerable in our society. We also have 98 jobs at risk with skills and experience that cannot be replaced. I'll remind you, Minister, that our proclamation states that we must cherish all the children of our nation equally. Then we must ensure that badly needed services for our children and their families are provided and maintained. Darndale is one of the biggest and most used creches in the country, and for an additional $200,000 a year would make it viable now and into the future. Everything has been tried. Pay cuts have been taken, costs have been reduced, fundraising has been tried, just like other creches have done throughout the country. It's also worth noting that $240,000 a year goes to revenue. So you are getting money back, Minister. Maybe not your department, but another department, another way. $330,000 a year is raised from contributions by parents. The social consequences of closing this creche is massive. Not only will it put people on the dole, but it will also affect parents who themselves work and help in the community. There is no flexibility in funding from TUSLA, DSP and the Early Years Policy Programmes and other fundraisers. The Early Years Policy Programme calculations are based purely on child numbers and the band their parents fit into. The DSP reimburses wages and has set allocations for materials and training based on participants' numbers. For a fifth of the money needed for Darndale, we also have a creche in Ballymun under threat. So it's not just this creche. There are other serious problems with creches.
Thank you, Deputy Ellis. Deputy Brune.
Thanks, Cathaoirleach. I'd like to also congratulate the new Minister for Children and to welcome him. Yesterday, Minister, I was honoured to cut the ribbon and open the new Golden Years Senior Centre in Darndale Belcamp Village when your colleague, Mr Riley, wasn't able to make it due to illness. But it was very incongruous. At the very same time as we were opening the Senior Centre, we public reps were hearing of the massive threat that's posed to the Jigsaw Integrated Childcare Creche Centre. It's a large community centre, as Deputy Ellis has said, in the country. It provides service to 260 children with a core staff of 55 and 44 CE, Jobs Initiative and TUS participants. 90% of the children come from the immediate area, an area that has been long designated by the Department of Education and other departments as an area of serious disadvantage. And 1/6 of the children cared for come from our own local traveller community. The centre opened in 2001, Minister, and it was to cater for a maximum of 150 children. Now it's catering for almost double that number, and CEO Calva Barnes has rightly pointed out that it provides a very important link between the social and health services and the local community. Of course, it provides much needed employment to the local area, with 60% of the staff in the immediate area. It's also had a history of great distinction. It received a Shielta Award for its work in 2013 for looking after our young children. Now, as Deputy Ellis again has said, it's come under incredible pressure the last number of years. It's a growing deficit. In 2012 it was €65,000, 2013 €63,000 in Cathaoirleach. This year almost heading into €200,000. So I'm informed, of course, that the cuts to community employment supports, changes to payments from PUBL and the HSE have been relentlessly cutting funding for this service, and the fundraising done by the centre has been in grave difficulties, obviously, as the years have gone on because of the recession. So my constituents, Dublin Bay North and in Darndale Belcamp Parish in particular, are pleading with you today to take decisive, necessary and immediate action to solve the serious crisis and ensure the continued viability and success of the wonderful Jigsaw Centre.
Thanks very much, Deputy Kenny.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. And Minister, I welcome you to your new position. The Darndale Belcamp Integrated Childcare Service Limited, also known as Jigsaw Creche, has evolved from its modest beginnings in 2001 into being the largest community creche in the country, and they now cater for 260 children daily. 90% of these children come from the immediate catchment area of Darndale, Belcamp and Mopeview, which is recognised as an area of social disadvantage. It also includes a traveller community. In fact, 1/6 of the children attending the creche are from the traveller community. The creche service presently employs 55 core staff, some of whom have been there for the 13 years of its existence, and 44 staff from Community Employment, Jobs Initiative and TOOS. This includes 1 full-time and 8 community employment participants from the traveller community, and in this regard I believe they are unique. As a recognition of their excellence as a creche, Jigsaw was presented with the Shield Award by former Minister Francis Fitzgerald, and I had the pleasure of being present as a TD for the area at the award ceremony. The centre over recent years had to accept financial cuts which they absorbed by way of pay cuts, changing the structure of the centre, and by fundraising to the extent of raising €112,000 in 2013. They have now reached a crisis and have been in discussion with their main funders, TUSLA, Department of Social Protection and the Childcare Directorate, to try to source an additional €200,000 to keep their centre open. They were recently informed by former Minister Fitzgerald that further payments from TUSLA would be made available to the centre while a long-term solution was being worked out. I appreciate, Minister, that you have only just commenced work in your new department. However, for the centre it is now quite stark. The only way that they can remain open is by direct intervention by yourself, Minister. As a Dublin North East Deputy, I believe that it is unacceptable that such a vital service as the Darndale Belcamp childcare service, which has the full support of the local community and public representatives, would close. The centre needs to know this week that these funds can be provided, as their cash flow is now drying up, and they have informed their staff and parents of the actual date of closure, which will be at the month end, or else they face the risk of trading recklessly. Thank you
very much, Deputy Minister. Your 4 minutes.
Thanks, Michaelik, and thanks, Deputies. I welcome the opportunity to respond to these issues as raised by Deputy Sean Kenny, Deputy Ellis and Deputy Tommy Bruin. In fact, I had an opportunity of discussing the matter briefly with Deputy Sean Kenny on the day after my appointment last Friday. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the importance of the services delivered by Darndale Belcamp Integrated Childcare Service Limited to some 260 children across the areas of Belcamp Darndale and Moatview. The centre was established in January 2001, has evolved, as Deputy Bruin has said, into the largest creche nationally. In 2013, the childcare service incurred expenditure of €2.022 million and received funding amounting to €1.96 million. This resulted in a deficit, it has been said, of some €62,000. I'm aware the centre has been experiencing cash flow difficulties recently, and this has given rise to concerns regarding its future operation. In order to assist the centre, the Child and Family Agency recently prepaid funding due in May and June. I want to acknowledge the support of the agency in this regard. I would further expect that the agency will be open to providing some further prepayments to the centre if this is of assistance in seeking to resolve underlying issues. The Child and Family Agency is one of a number of state agencies which provides funding to support the provision of services at the centre. The level of support provided is very significant and is being provided at a time when all service providers are faced with particular challenges arising from the need to restore order to our public finances. The Child and Family Agency provided funding of almost €360,000 last year. My department is responsible for funding 3 childcare schemes, including the Community Childcare Subvention Programme, the Childcare Education and Training Support Programme, which are both administered by Pobble, and thirdly, the Early Childhood Care and Education Programme, which is administered directly by my department. Funding to the centre under these schemes amounted to over €550,000 in 2013. This represents a total funding in excess of €900,000 from my department's vote. Funding is paid to the service in respect of actual attendance of children under the various programmes, and funding is paid according to the national capitation rates paid to all preschool services. The department does not provide a grant to the service directly for salaries or administration in any way. I've asked my officials to meet urgently with the Child and Family Agency and with Pobble, which administers a number of childcare schemes on behalf of the department, to explore all possible solutions to the current difficulties, which I acknowledge are real. My predecessor, Minister Fitzgerald, recently advised the centre that, in her view, the overall provision of early years services in the area might usefully be considered in seeking solutions to the current difficulties. I concur with this view, as we need to ensure that all available resources to support these key services are maximised. All services in receipt of state funding have had to generate greater efficiency savings, and while I appreciate the challenges involved, it's important that all such avenues are fully explored. I mentioned that the centre incurred a deficit of €62,000. This was partly achieved through successful fundraising. I understand that fundraising projections for this year are not as strong, and there is a risk of a projected deficit of up to €200,000. I acknowledge the need to avoid such a deficit, but the centre's own income projections show an income at €1.8 million, which continues to be available. With such a level of financial support available, it should be possible to work constructively to achieve continued services and to avoid a closure scenario that has been outlined by Deputies Ellis and Kenny and Brown. The funders will be available to support this process. In conclusion, Cathaoirleach, I wish to assure the House that this matter is being given priority attention by my department. I hope that a resolution to the current difficulties can be found within the total resources available to the centre and to support the provision of early years service generally in the area.
Thank you very much. To the deputies, you each have a minute left. I know it's not a long time, but you might
Thanks,
put in your
Minister,
supplementary.
for your response. I think it's worth noting that the HSE in the past promised the Darndale funding for a specific number of staff and 40 children and operational costs, but it never materialised, and instead it reduced its funding by $300,000 over the past 5 years. Had this commitment been lived up to, it would have given an additional $191,000 for 2014. The only other, that's one option that maybe the Minister could look at to see whether the HSE reneged on a commitment. The other option is that TUSLA redirects some of its funding. But as has been said, your department is very important in this. Whether you can meet additional funding in this, I think that's very important, because we have the most vulnerable children, and the social consequences of them and their families not having this type of support is massive. Minister, we just need urgent action in this. And I heard what you said, you're going to get as many people on board to try and work out a solution. But it is imperative that we have a solution. This is not the only problem we have with creches. And I mentioned the Ballymum one earlier. We have other problems arising because of the way funding is directed.
Thank you, Deputy Ellis. Deputy Brown.
Thanks, Cathaoirleach. Well, Minister, obviously you mentioned in relation to the prepayments from the Child and Family Agency and the payments from your own department. Is it possible, though, for you to work and perhaps to visit the Jigsaw Centre and to work with Kelda Barnes and her staff to examine all ways there and then of how the project can continue throughout this 2014? I think everybody is thinking globally of the changes that need to be made in budgetary spending from next year on, and to have a much more expansive approach. And in that context, isn't the core point that's facing you and facing the centre, obviously, is to get through 2014 and then to have a proper budgetary consideration for 2015. I noticed, Minister, you were asked today, and I asked you or your predecessor a few days ago about the after-school childcare initiative, and that so far I think only 42 children have been looked after on that. Is it the case then that there could be some spending? It was 14 million allocated for that, Cathaoirleach. There could be some funding in your department which would be the core element in keeping the project open and working successfully to the end of this year. As I said, it's the linchpin in a lot of things in Darndale Belcamp Parish and the wider area, Minister. The success of schools, the success of kids going on to finish second level, and the growing success of people going to third level. It's all based on what this creche does.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cathaoirleach.
Deputy Kenny.
Thanks, Cathaoirleach. And I wanted to thank the Minister for his response, and I welcome the fact that he's open to making further prepayments to the centre in order to tie them over the temporary crisis. And I'm also glad that your officials are giving this matter a priority to ensure that the centre gets funded on a proper basis. I'd like to support the points already made by the other deputies, Bruin and Ellis, in relation to the importance of this centre for the entire Darndale Belcamp area. It's an area that has gone through a lot of difficulties in the past. It's now beginning to improve, and the level of services, particularly these kind of public and community services that are provided to children at this young age, which helps them to get into primary school, helps them to go on to second level and then on to third level. I think that's the key to tackling this whole question of social disadvantage. And I think it's important that this will get the priority and that the Minister, his officials, that he will give it the priority that it needs to put the centre on a proper, permanent basis.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Minister, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank the deputies for raising the issue, and a number of options have been put forward. The role of the HSE, the role of the Child and Family Agency, indeed the role of my department. I want to say that all possible options are currently being explored. There have been a number of meetings, there are a number of meetings, and there will continue to be high-level meetings until such time as resolution can be found. I'm acutely aware that access to affordable quality childcare can be a significant barrier to many low-income and disadvantaged families to avail of work opportunities. I've heard from yourselves that is the case in this area. Investment totalling more than 260 million is being provided this year by my department to support the programmes. I want to say that I'm attaching a significant priority to children and family services, including the provision of early years services, about which we are discussing this evening. I would hope that the present difficulties at the Darndale Belcamp Centre can be satisfactorily resolved. There is a requirement for all of the parties mentioned to work to resolve the current difficulties in a constructive and proportionate manner. And I'm very conscious of the point that Deputy Ellis has made, with particular reference to the health services and the manner in which commitments may not have been committed in the manner as projected. So, as a first step, I've arranged for a meeting of the funding agencies, following which I expect there will be an early meeting with the centre to explore on a constructive basis all options for achieving a sustainable approach to the operations at the centre. I want to ask all parties to work with this process, as indicated by my predecessor, to use whatever space can be provided to identify constructive solutions, and we've had a couple of them here today, which will continue to deliver a service to young children and their parents in the Belcamp and Darndale area. And I undertake to keep in close contact with the deputies and others on this issue.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, deputies.